Welcome to the Art Colony, a podcast about art and art history in Provincetown. My name is Gaston. We're lucky here in Provincetown. All of us who are artists, art fans, art students, art anything. Not only do we have multiple institutions that support the arts, numerous and varied art galleries, engaging art events year-round, we also have a really great art museum. The Provincetown Art Association and Museum, commonly known as PAAM, P-A-A-M. The history of this museum extends all the way back to 1914. So it's fair to say that the PAAM has played one of the most important, continuous roles in our Provincetown art colony, and it remains, as it says on its Instagram profile, the anchor of the Provincetown arts community. To talk with me today about the illustrious legacy of the Provincetown Art Association and Museum, I have none other than the PAAM's Chief Executive Officer, Christine McCarthy. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you for having me.
I'm very happy to have you here.
Yeah.
So, can you tell us, who is Christine McCarthy?
Let's see, where to start? I grew up in Connecticut, outside of Hartford, and my family business is used auto parts.
Oh, okay.
And I'm Italian. And so if you looked at Christine McCarthy, I don't think you'd ever think that A, I was Italian, or in the field that I chose that I could have been fixing your car right now.
Okay.
But luckily, my grandmother, my Italian grandmother, was very, very adamant that her grandchildren be cultured. And so she made sure that we went to museums and that we went to the ballet and the opera and to travel, experience life, food, culture. That was really a big part of what we were immersed in. And she put all 9 of her grandchildren through college. And when I went to college, I went to Providence College in Providence, Rhode Island, and I was a humanities major, which kind of meant I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do something in a creative field. I didn't want to be an accountant. I didn't want to work in a cube. I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't quite sure what that was. So I was taking Italian, I was taking art history classes, I was taking photography classes, and I definitely knew that I was sort of on the right path. And then my junior year abroad, I went to Italy. And it was funny because my older sister and my cousins, everyone was going to Spain. And my grandfather was like, why is everyone going to Spain? We're Italian. Why isn't anybody going to Italy? I'm like, I'm going to Italy. So I spent the first 3 months of my program in Siena. And it took me about, 20 years to realize that I've lived in the 2 places that have
The same tower.
the Siena and Provincetown. And I took an intensive language and I knew broken Italian and a lot of slang. And when I really learned how to speak pure Italian, it was life-changing for me because A, I couldn't believe how my family butchered words, but at the same time, I just thought it was such a beautiful language. And then the next half of the program was in Florence, and it was all art history. Our classes were actually in the museum. So the Accademia and the Uffizi, those were actually my classrooms. And it's where I became completely obsessed with objects, with artworks, with works on paper, books, things like that. And I knew that I was on a path somewhere here because I wanted to work in a museum. And I just didn't know exactly how or why or where or what. But I didn't want to come back. When my program was over, I still had to finish my senior year. I didn't want to come back. My parents made me come back. And so I was like, all right, well, then when I graduated from school, my whole kind of thinking was that I need to get back to Italy. I just want to go move there and live there. So Syracuse University in upstate New York had an art history program that you went and studied 1 semester at the university, and then you did the rest of your master's in Florence. I'm like,
That's perfect.
yeah, exactly. Well, so we thought. So I get to Syracuse, and I was taking, mostly art history classes. I was an Italian Renaissance major, and there was something that was missing. It wasn't that it was, I was looking at slides a lot, looking at books. I wasn't looking at real life objects. And midway through the first semester, Syracuse started a museum studies program. The only other museum studies program at the time, and this was a long time ago, was at NYU. So Syracuse started this program and nobody signed up for it, like nobody. They got not one person to enroll. So the director of that program came to the art history students and he said, if you take this program, we'll give it to you for free. It'll basically 2 masters for the price of 1. Now, I'm not a math major, but I did know that that sounded like a good deal, but at the same time, it was, like, not my path. I'm like, "I just gotta get back to Florence," but I thought, "You know what? I think this might be a really good thing." So I said, "Okay," and I enrolled, and it was life-changing for me for a lot of reasons, because A, no one knew what they were doing. It was all fly by the seat of your pants, which I kinda love. And Syracuse actually has an incredible permanent collection that belongs to the university, which is mostly works on paper, but like Dürers and Piranesi and really heavy duty works on paper. And I fell in love with this collection. And at the same time, Syracuse had just built a brand new art building, and my class got to design the art gallery. Again, nobody knew what we were doing, but we got to curate out of the collection, and the more that I got myself around objects, again, I knew it. I'm like, "This is what it is. I wanna work in a museum, and I wanna be a curator. That's what I wanna do." So I finished the program, and as part of the requirement, you had to do a fellowship, and I did a fellowship at Yale, at the Yale University Art Gallery, which was only about 20 minutes from where I grew up. So I went to Yale, and on the first day of my internship or my fellowship, I kept thinking, "I'm not smart enough to be at Yale. They're fingerprinting me," all this kinda stuff, and they introduced me to this man, this Doctor Richard Field, who's gonna be my boss, and I looked down and he has 2 different shoes on. So I thought, "Okay, we're gonna be just fine." He was super book smart and heady and really knowledgeable, and I think I have a good combination of common sense and book smart, I guess. So anyhow, my job there was he would just give me piles and piles of works on paper and just be like, "Find out what you can." So I got to go to all of the different libraries on the campus, the Beinecke Library, the, art library. I had a pass to all that. So I loved it. I loved every minute of it. And the exhibition that I got to work on, I think it was 5 paintings. It was Manet, Renoir. It was 5 French painters, and our department provided the preparatory sketches, watercolors, and all of the studies that led up to the final painting. It was like a dream come true. This is in my and now I knew that this was what all museum work was like, working at Yale with a fabulous collection, money, lots of people working in your department, and I was like, "This is it." And so when my fellowship was over, I, started applying for jobs and everything, and I got, oh man, I don't know, 50 rejection letters. Everything was a rejection. I was like, "How could this be? I just have this amazing education, and I just did a job at Yale." Mm-mm. So a friend of mine was moving to Boston, and she's like, "You wanna move to Boston?" I'm like, "Yeah," because there's way more in Boston. So I moved to Boston in 1994, and the ICA, which was still on Boylston Street, that's the Institute of Contemporary Art, they were doing an Elvis in Maryland exhibition, and they were hiring people to work that exhibition, which they thought was gonna be the blockbuster of the century. Well, it ended up being the fail of the century. It was an absolute bomb in Boston. I mean, they had a Maryland jump out of a plane over Fenway Park. All the T stops had Elvis and Maryland posters and all this stuff, and they built a box office and hired all this extra staff, and it absolutely flopped. But I got a job working in the galleries, so I was like, "Okay, here it is. Here's my big break." Meanwhile, I knew nothing about contemporary art. I was like an Italian Renaissance major, but I'm a good bullshitter too, so I could definitely work my way around this. So I started working in other departments. Like I worked in education, I worked in operations, I worked in curatorial, and I became really good friends with the assistant to the director at the time, and she was leaving to go to California, and she said, "You should be the new assistant to the director." I'm like, "Really?" She's like, "Yeah." She's like, "You'll learn everything. You'll know everything." And I'm like, "Okay." So I applied for that job and I got it. And my boss was a woman named Milena Kalinowska, who is from the Czech Republic, and she was the most brilliant curator of all time, and she gave me my contemporary art, like, 101 and immersed me in all contemporary art. And at the time, the artists that were working at the ICA would come and install for, like, 3 weeks. It was Cornelia Parker and Rachel White Reed, Sildo Morellis, all these, it was a lot of contemporary artists who hadn't really gotten their due yet, but they were emerging, and some were beyond emerging. But my job was to make sure that they got everything they needed. And I worked with donors, and I worked with board members, and I worked with everybody, and I learned the secret. If you ever really wanna find something out at a museum or get in, is you call the assistant to the director. That's why I don't have an assistant.
Okay.
So, then Milena left, and there was a year and a half where there was no director, and I was in the director's office, so I ran the director's office. And the ICA was at a very pivotal point where it was either gonna close or do something, and that's when the decision was made to build the new ICA on the waterfront. So I worked on that for 2 years. We had to basically make up a design of what a new ICA would look like, the first new contemporary art museum in 100 years in Boston, or a new museum in Boston, and working with politicians, and that's where McCarthy comes in handy because all the politicians in Boston are Irish, so they would just send me in to tell them whatever they wanted to hear. And so, right when the architects, Diller and Scofidio, were hired to build this new ICA, a $60 million project, a colleague of mine sent me this job description of the museum in Provincetown. And I had been coming to Provincetown for probably like 7 or 8 years as a visitor, and I saw this and I'm like, "Who in the world would even apply for this job?" And I was like, "Oh, maybe you should because you'll go to get an interview and go to Provincetown for the weekend." So that's what I did. And 24 years ago, is it Portuguese Festival this weekend or next weekend? 24 years
We're
ago.
doing the interview on June 16th.
So on Portuguese Festival weekend of 2001, I came to Provincetown for my interview at PAAM. I was in a suit. I was wearing a business suit. It was unseasonably hot. It was probably like 100 degrees and there was no air conditioning at PAAM. And I just remember I was sitting there and I could feel sweat like just coming from everywhere. But in my mind, I wasn't going to take this job because I was just here for the weekend. And part of the deal was that they were going to put me up at a board member's house. And I was a little leery about that, but I was like, okay. And her name was Ruth Hebert, and Ruth lived on Pleasant Street, and her father had been the town doctor in Provincetown. And I walked into her house and I looked and I knew, I didn't know who hardly any of the artists were, but I knew the work was good. And all of a sudden I saw Milton Avery. I started seeing other things and I was like, wait, and I'm like, this is pretty serious art collection. And so I ended up staying with her for 3 nights, even though my interview was only 2 days, because she really schooled me on what Provincetown was about and why the art community in Provincetown was so important and what it meant for artists to have a place to come and learn and create and be with each other and have this camaraderie in a town like Provincetown. And so I after this 3 days, my brain was spinning. And I went home, I went back to Boston. I had a beautiful apartment in the north end of Boston, and I went to my apartment. I'm like, "What am I gonna do? What if they offer me this job? What am I gonna do?" So 2 weeks later, I got a call, "We wanna offer you the job." But I hadn't we hadn't talked about, "When am I gonna make any money? You're gonna give me health insurance? Where am I gonna live?" So I said, "Alright, I'll come back for a second interview." So I came back right at the beginning of July, and, they're like I was gonna make half of what I was making in Boston. I didn't have a place to live. I was gonna move here in July, and I was like and I thought to myself, "Why wouldn't you do this?" I was 34 years old. I wanted to be a museum director. I, at that point, had kind of figured that out, and I was like, "And here is my golden opportunity." So I said yes, and I gave 2 weeks notice at my job, which I still feel bad about, actually, because right now that's just such a bad thing to do, and I think it was July 19th was my first day here at PAM, and I showed up to work, and no one was there. I didn't have keys. I couldn't get in. Finally, I got in. There was a class in the parking lot waiting. They couldn't get in. And so I finally someone showed up. I went to my office and my new office, and I sat in my chair, and it rolled across the floor to the other side of the office because it was so lopsided. And I looked around and I was like, "Oh, God, did I just make the biggest mistake of my life?" Well, clearly I didn't because 24 years later, I'm still here. And I remember that day like it was yesterday, and I was, like, panic stricken because I was like, "Okay, I'm the one in charge here now," and I had 2 employees, lots of volunteers, a board, no money, and a building that was falling down. And so, one of the conditions of my hire was that we were gonna renovate the museum. There if I was like, "If you decide we're not doing this, I'm out." I'm like, "I'm not doing this." And so, it took about a year to kind of figure out what, we needed to do to start a capital campaign, and all I did for the first summer I was here to say I was sorry because people would like, "You sold a Charles Hawthorne painting in 1970 and blah, blah, blah," or something. I'm like, "Yeah, I was 3, but that's alright. I'll just say I'm sorry." I just said I was sorry to everyone and everything. I really wanted to learn, like, why people didn't go there, why people were, angry about this, that, and the other thing, but then the people who really loved it and why they loved it. So I kinda just stayed in the galleries that whole first summer and just talked to anybody who I could talk to figure out why the museum that was supposed to uphold the legacy of the oldest continuous art colony in America was ready to fall down. That's what I was trying to figure out. And I kinda know the answer to that, sometimes I don't know the answer to that, but all I know is that I was, like, on a mission to make that museum world class. I'm still not done yet, but we're getting there.
So the museum was founded, well,
Yes.
the association was
Yes.
founded in 1914.
Yes.
Why was it put together? I mean, this is very early in the history of the art colony.
Yes.
It had only really started 15 years before.
Right.
What was the impetus to suddenly say, "Well, we need this place"?
Good question. So, Charles Hawthorne came to Provincetown in 1899. He had been studying with William Merritt Chase in Shinnecock on Long Island, and William Merritt Chase had a plein air school. And Hawthorne really thought the model was smart, so he brought that model to Provincetown to open up the Cape Cod School of Art. Prior to Hawthorne coming here, though, there was a woman named Dewing Woodward who came to Provincetown in 1896. She was a lesbian. She opened up a school of art, but she gets no billing
Oh, I
because
didn't know that.
I know, because she only ran her school with her partner for 1 summer. But we have a drawing in the collection from 1896, and she lived in the little red house that's across from the Red Inn.
Mhm.
That's where she lived. So there were artists before Hawthorne, there were schools before Hawthorne, but because Hawthorne's school still continues today, that's why it's the oldest continuous art colony in America. And so Hawthorne opens this school in 1899, and a lot of people heard about it through word of mouth, and they started coming to take classes, and it was mostly women who were coming to take classes. They were coming from Chicago, they were coming from New York, they were coming from Ohio, and they would come and, I don't remember if the classes were a week long or how long you would take a class, but it was probably a week. And more people just started coming, and so when you get a group of people together who are making art, clearly they wanna exhibit it somewhere, they wanna hang it somewhere, so by 1914, this group had grown so large that they decided that we need a formal organization that is gonna represent these artists, give them a platform, and figure out a place to show. So they formed the Provincetown Art Association in 1914, so that's 15 years after Hawthorne. He and 4 other artists, Ambrose Webster, Oscar Giebrich, Garrett Benneker, and there's one more who's escaping me right now, and a group of people formed the Provincetown Art Association in 1914, and so the first exhibition was actually at the town hall in 1916 or
That's the
17,
same town
the
hall that we
same
now
town
have.
hall. And if you go into any municipal building in Provincetown, whether it's the library, you will see original artwork, and you will see artwork because they were showing there, but when they were all going back to where they came from for the winter, a lot of them weren't hauling the artwork back and forth, so the town started a collection. So that's really the formation of the art association was really the formation of the town collection as well. In fact, the painting of the Philomena Manta, the big hawthorn that's in town hall, that hangs there all the time of the fisherman on the boat, on the back, that says property of the Provincetown Art Association.
Okay.
I'll get that back someday, but it's always up, so we'll leave it there for now. Let's put a pin in that for now.
Okay.
And so then by the time, the organization started getting bigger and bigger, town hall just couldn't accommodate the exhibition, so they basically said, "You're gonna have to find another spot," and that's when a couple of the board members found 460 Commercial Street, where PAAM is located now, and they were able to purchase the property in 1920 and 1921 for 2 payments of $2,500. So it was $5,000, and it was the sea captain's house that's there now, the 1820s sea captain's house, and then there was another, structure, which was a tenement house.
Okay.
They added on in the 30s, the 50s, and the 70s. They kept adding on galleries because it kept growing and growing, and it was mostly volunteers who did the work to build that museum. And then come the 70s, that's when pretty much no more work was done to it except necessary until 2001.
So it's always been in that location on Commercial Street. It's just a different building now.
Well, the sea captain's house is the same. That's the same. It's the modern wing was 2 cinder block galleries, and I'll attest to you on the microphone that there is no historical significance or architectural significance of cinder block. I'm just saying that out loud
Okay.
because believe me, that was something that was a big battle. Anyways, yeah, so in 2003 to 2005, we restored the historic wing. That's the part that has the big gallery with the piano, the middle gallery, and the sea captain's house. That was all restored I mean, it's the original floors in the Captain's Gallery and in the Hoffman Gallery. And then we basically upgraded the systems. We put in a foundation. It was sitting on the sand. It was amazing, though, when we gutted the building, we found a painting under the sand. We found the tops of the nail bins that they used to build it. So we found all this really cool stuff. No bodies, thank God, or they
Okay.
didn't tell me.
Yeah, very important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so the whole point was to bring the historic side back to its original state and restore those galleries, and then we knocked down the other wing, and we excavated 4,500 square feet underground where the permanent collection lives, built 2 new galleries, and then 4 classrooms upstairs, because we always have had a school there too, but it was this really tiny, dirty little classroom with a dirty window, and no one wanted to teach there, and no one wanted to take classes there. So that was another piece of it, is preserving the art association piece, which was the place for members to be able to show their work, the museum piece, which was about housing the collection, and then the school, so that we had studio space where artists could either teach and learn or both.
When the association and museum was first put together, was it open to the public year round, or was it
Yeah.
only for membership shows? What sort of interaction did the community have with it at the beginning?
It was a seasonal. It's only been year round for about 35 years.
Okay.
So it was seasonal, and all of the exhibitions were juried. So they had a jury, and they had like 5 vice presidents, and they were all artists, and they would have a show called First Show. That was First Show, and that would be the one exhibition that they would do a year in the summer. But they definitely had concerts there though, and they had lectures, and it was definitely a gathering space. It was there. I think the admission was $2 or something like that. And artists who were members, though, because you had to pay your dues, there was still a membership program. And those artists were the ones that could show in the exhibitions. You had to be a member in good standing, but anybody could come in to see the exhibitions. And the openings were very social. I mean, it's always been a very, very social space.
That sounds like now.
Yeah,
Because you still have membership
I
shows.
know.
We still have to be members that have paid our dues.
That's right.
And it's always a big party
That's
when they
right.
open.
See, I like to think that we're very steeped in tradition, but we just have taken it to a contemporary level.
Is it something common in museums to have these membership shows? I don't think I've seen that in other places where I've lived, but here it's a very important, pivotal part of the art calendar.
It's part of the mission. The Art
Yes.
Association is part of the mission, and it has been since. We've never changed the mission. The mission is the same since 1921. When the organization became incorporated as a nonprofit. You will only find probably maybe 4 art association museum combinations in the country. This is a very unique model in that the members, and if you think about it, just about every artist that is hanging on the walls in PAAM was a member or is a member, because all of the historic artists had to be members. So
Mhm.
we rarely have an exhibition that doesn't showcase the membership in some way, shape, or form. So we stick to that model, which at first, I'll be completely honest with you, when I came, I think it was the first members open. There were like 400 pieces of art sitting on the floor of one of the galleries, and I was like, "Good Lord, how in the world is this gonna happen?"
Well, I was just going to ask
Yeah.
you, can you describe the membership shows?
Yeah.
Because maybe some of our listeners have never been and don't know what that is. So 400 pieces of art on the floor.
Or and
Keep
how
on describing.
and none of them make sense, because a lot of these shows are unthemed. So you have 400 pieces of art, and how are they gonna get on the wall, and how are we gonna make sense of these? And the next morning, a group of people members showed up, and they're like, "Okay, we're here to hang the show." And Jim Zimmerman, who's been at PAAM, he's been there way before I came, is the master. And he basically, this is the plan and this is what we do. And then in 2 days, 400 works are up on the wall. And believe me, there are people that think exhibitions just appear magically on the walls. Sometimes at PAAM they do, to tell you that's not true. And the idea is that the open shows, because back in the day, all of the shows were juried. So there were times when an artist may not ever get into an exhibition. Here, and the model for PAAM has been this way for a long time, is that we do open shows where everybody gets in. We have juried shows where artists, I usually try to bring jurors from over the bridge or far away, so that it's a fair blind jury, and that they're creating a theme or a design based on the works that move them. And that's how a juried show happens. And then we do invitationals, where sometimes we invite artists to be included in exhibitions. We have collection shows, which most of the artists in the collection were members. So in theory, the majority of what we do are member-based exhibitions.
And they're great. They're a
They're
lot of fun.
amazing,
I love
amazing.
when you have the open shows, the fun part is since everybody gets in,
Yeah,
you get to see a lot of works and you get to know the personalities of a lot of people that you don't get exposed to on a regular
absolutely.
basis because some artists are not in galleries.
Right,
Some artists are not part of my everyday circuit.
correct.
So all of a sudden I see these beautiful drawings, paintings, sculptures, and I go, who is this?
I know.
But I would not have seen it unless there would have been an open show like this.
It's true, and it's a very cyclical kind of process. So because I've been there so long, it's like you see new people come to town. Hopefully, the first person, a point of contact, tells them you're an artist. You need to join PAAM. They join PAAM. They start coming to things. They put something in an exhibition. They may start taking classes. They may start teaching classes. Then they, might get picked up by a gallery. Then they might get something in the permanent collection. So it all kind of comes full circle. I mean, it takes time, believe me. And but I've watched it and I've seen it, and it's really, really exciting. And I use Marion Roth as an example. Um, when I first met Marion, she was a pinhole photographer. She turned her van into a pinhole camera, and she was doing things all over town. And then she started taking classes at PAM. She took a painting class with Bob Henry, and she took a printmaking class with Vicky Tomeko. And she started making prints and she started painting. And then all of a sudden, she started merging photography, printmaking, painting into a whole new process. And I watched it happen. And I think about that all the time. Someone who wasn't afraid to reinvent themselves, someone who wasn't afraid to learn, because I really believe in lifelong learners, someone who wasn't afraid to take a risk that maybe you weren't going to be as good as a printmaker as you were as a photographer or a painter, but it didn't matter because Marion figured out how to do this. And I think about her as kind of a role model in terms of how a class or just interactions with artists can change or push you in a different direction. And I love that. And that's one of my favorite parts of being able to watch people grow and expand and push themselves because they want to. And I love that.
And that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And then the juried shows, well, then as an artist, I can say it's either euphoria or heartbreak.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I submit pieces, I think this is the best thing I've ever created, and then it's not selected. And some other times I just put whatever I have on the wall and it gets in. I think I've gotten into six or seven juried shows.
That's amazing.
But talking about juried shows, back in the 1920s, there was a big conflict based on juries and who was getting into the shows. Can you talk about that?
I can. Up until 1927, the majority of the artists that were painting in Provincetown were plein air painters. They were painting out of doors. They were more of the impressionist, traditional ilk of painting. And when modern art, 1913 is when the Armory show in New York featured Duchamp's Nude Descending the Staircase, and that's what blew up the art world. And all of a sudden, the art world started changing, and more modern and abstract artists started painting and creating works that looked nothing like the traditional painters. And so, obviously, because all of the art world was connected to Provincetown at that point, or a lot of the art world was, the abstract movement moved to Provincetown. Hans Hofmann came to Provincetown and opened up a school of art, but that wasn't until like 1935. But from 1927 to 1937, there was a 10-year period where the traditional painters at the Provincetown Art Association refused to show in the same gallery as these more abstract and modern painters. So they had to have two separate shows, first show and second show, because there was this refusal of being in the same space, which that story actually holds a lot of water. At the time, I thought it was like, this is so ridiculous. And we actually have a petition that was started by Todd Lindenmuth and Ross Moffat and Carl Knaths. And it's like a mile, it's like a scroll that's a mile long of all of the artists who finally signed on to say, we're getting rid of this and we're going to have an exhibition and everyone is going to show together.
Getting rid in 1937 of the separation.
1937 of the separation.
I loved how they named it the regular show
Yeah,
and the modern
the
show.
regulars and the moderns. And during our centennial, which was in 2014, we actually had a regulars versus moderns exhibition, and we featured art that was included in some of those separate exhibitions, and we put them together, which was really, really fun. But when we designed the building, now this is a historical, traditional captain's house that we paired with a modern wing. I couldn't believe how furious people were that we were gonna put something modern next to something traditional, and I felt like I was transported back to 1930. I'm like, "This must have been how the director of the Provincetown Art Association felt when he got the knock," or the yeah, it was I'm sure it was a man, got a knock on the door and said, "Hey, well, I'm not showing in the same space as this crap," or something like that, and I experienced that with people not wanting to think about the big picture, that the mission of PAAM is not just to preserve the historic legacy, but we promote contemporary art. We have over 850 contemporary artists that show on an annual basis. So the building actually is more true to the mission than ever because it preserves the past, but it promotes the future. And I think that's what the whole thing was. And I was so excited about it, and I could not believe how many people hated it, like hated it. And I mean, most people have gotten over it at this point, but there are still like a woman came in recently and she said, I still think this is the ugliest building in town. And I'm like,
Oh,
great, thanks. Like, but you're in here, so that's a good
yeah.
thing. I don't care if you think it's ugly, if you're still coming in.
Well, that's interesting because I was actually wondering as I was preparing for the interview if this conflict between the regulars, in quotes, or the moderns is still something that you feel or still something that I don't feel it in town, but you're in a more
Yeah.
exposed.
Not so much in exhibitions anymore, and when I curate, I love to include, things from different periods. I love to push the envelope and feel the tension between work, but one of the things that we say, like, every year when the Fine Arts Work Center, the new fellows come to town, we do a little orientation at PAM because we're getting ready to do their exhibition, and a lot of them have never been to Provincetown before, and I always tell them, "Go out to the dunes, go to Beach Forest, go to somewhere in the National Seashore. Look at the dunes, and the dunes that you're looking at are the same dunes that Ross Moffett looked at or Charles Hawthorne looked at, and the only one who gets to mess with the dunes anymore is really Mother Nature, so the fact that you're gonna be inspired by the same landscape as these artists that were way before you is how you get connected to the art colony, like, th and people always ask me, "Why do artists come here? What is it about the light?" And I say, "I can try to explain it to you, but you just need to come here and see it for yourself because I don't care how many pictures you look at or videos, you experience that light, or whether it's the sun on the bay sparkling or a gray, stormy day or the most beautiful sunrise or sunset. It's I mean, you feel it, and you just can't describe it, and that's what I tell people, you have to come and see it yourself,
Mhm.
and I think artists who came here, whether it was out of curiosity or word of mouth or what have you, experiencing the natural environment of Provincetown is so much a part of the artistic piece of Provincetown, like, they go hand in hand, and there couldn't be one without the other.
And it's also such a dynamic art scene.
Very much so.
And for me, that was a big part of it. I arrived here, and yes, there's the nature, there's
Yeah,
all the environment, but also the fact that I was surrounded by all this effervescence, so many
absolutely.
artists and
Everywhere.
so much art happening
Yeah,
everywhere. So Provincetown is a place that has deep roots in art, and you
very.
took over its biggest institution. So what are some of the biggest challenges you faced when you started in 2001?
Well, we had no money. I mean, that
Oh,
that
okay,
that
well, that's
was
a big one.
that was a big one, and, like, the same 3 people paid the bills at the end of the year, the same 3 donors who were lovely, and but then when we wanted to do this renovation, there had been no giving history, like, nobody gave to a capital campaign, nobody gave, to an annual fund, so it was really like starting from scratch, but this was the 2 questions that everyone in the town agreed on. Do you want the art that was made here to stay here? Yes. Do you want the art that was made here to come back here, like borrowing from the Whitney and, that kind of thing? Yes. So that was the only 2 questions where I got yeses across the board because everybody else was, like, all over the place about the design and, what it was gonna do. November it'll be 20 years in November that we snipped the ribbon on the new building, and when people walked in and they saw a Wolf Kahn exhibition because he was here studying with Hans Hofmann, Motherwell, Hopper, Hoffman, a juried show. I can't remember what Machado and Silvetti, the architects, had done a little show about how they created the design. If I added $1 for every "Oh my god, I got it that," I would never have to fundraise again, but people were still so skeptical about the change and was it gonna lose the feeling of the old art association and not be funky and all that. That's why with those benches will always stay there because those represent the past.
Okay.
And they're uncomfortable as hell, but I would never get rid of them, and I wanted there to be some sense of the past, but the whole point was, if we have the responsibility of upholding this legacy, then we better have a museum that allows us to do the work we need to do because we weren't meeting our mission at all. And the idea that we did a big Dickinson show in 2007, that was our first big exhibition where we really borrowed from the Met and MoMA and the Whitney. It was then that I got a number of letters and phone calls from people, "Now we know why you did this." Because when I came in and saw that Dickinson show, I almost fell over. And then it kind of started domino affecting. And then the other big thing that happened was in 2002, the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston did Blanche Lazelle, and the white line woodblock block print. It was called From Paris to Provincetown. That was the name of the exhibition, but it couldn't come to Provincetown because the museum rained inside. When it rained outside, we had no climate control, no controls or systems at all. And people said to me, "Well, why don't you have those white line woodblock prints? Why aren't you doing these?" I said, "Well, this is my point. This is what we're trying to do." We had no more storage, so people weren't leaving their collections, like Nappy's collection, for example. For those of you who knew Nappy and Nappy's restaurant, PAAM has now permanently accessed 358 works of art from Nappy's collection into the PAAM collection. Those never would have come if we hadn't done a renovation because we weren't able to care for them. I wouldn't have left anything. But the idea was, I don't think a nice building made PAAM a great organization. It gave us the tools and kind of the stepping stones to get the systems in place that we needed to get in to be able to say, we have 5 Frankenthalers in our collection. We have the second largest collection of Hopper in the world to the Whitney Museum. That's what happens when you do this type of renovation and do all the work that goes along with it, which, believe me, there has never been an easy day, but there's never been a day that I regret anything that I've done.
That's
Well,
great.
that's not, I can't say anything. There's definitely a few regrets, but in terms of the path we followed and the work that we've done, I will always be the most proud.
And that leads directly into what I wanted to ask about the collection.
Mhm.
It's how do these works get into the collection? One of my previous guests in a previous interview said one thing that's sad about Provincetown is that a lot of the work that was done here did not stay here because
Right.
these artists would come work for the summer and take their work back to wherever they came from.
Exactly.
But from what you're saying, we do still have a lot of
We
them. So how do you acquire these pieces in the collection?
Well, don't invite me to your house because I'll excuse myself and case it and see what you have. Actually, it's been a lot. It's a lot of relationship building. I mean, with Nappy, for example, it took 20 years for Nappy to even, I think, trust me as a museum professional. And Jim Bacher was super influential in steering Nappy in the direction of gifting that collection, which fills in a lot of blanks of early Provincetown.
Jim Bacher owns a gallery
The
here in
Bacher
town
Gallery,
that
yes.
specializes in historical paintings.
Correct. And Jim has been doing this for decades, and he was one of my mentors. He's the one who helped school me on Provincetown art and what that all meant, and I'm so grateful to him. He actually hired me. He was the president of the board when I was hired, and so I owe Jim Bacher a huge debt of gratitude. But the other thing is about there are a lot of people that have second or third homes here, and they live in other places who collect Provincetown art. So believe me, New York, Miami, DC, Maryland, Palm Springs, San Francisco, LA, I go on the road and like look and find things and things that we've borrowed. Like this is actually a really neat story. When we did the Dickinson show in '07, there was a painting from I think it was 1914, and it's actually the pier in the rain, and it's a rainy wharf picture, and it's the most sublime, exquisite painting on the planet. And we borrowed that, and it was on extended loan to the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And the donor or the owner of this piece had come to the opening, came in my office, and he's like, "I have to talk to you." And I'm always nervous when people tell me that. And he said, "I was just down on the pier, and it was a really gray, rainy day." And he said, "And I saw that." He pointed to the painting. "I saw that today. You need to have that painting." I said, "Well, are you going to call Philadelphia and tell them that I'm not giving it back?" He goes, "Yes, I'll give them something else." So because of that relationship, and this man's name was Dan Dietrich, and he was the nicest man in the whole world, and he was based in Philadelphia. He had one of the biggest collections of Edwin Dickinson. And so when he passed away, I got this lawyer showed up at my door and was like, "There are 3 beneficiaries to Dan's Dickinson collection, and you're one of them. The other is the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts and the Philadelphia Art Museum. And basically, you need to write a dissertation and tell me why you should get some of these paintings." And I was like, "You gotta be kidding." But I did. It was I remember being in my office really late at night and trying to compile this paper as to why we should have these paintings. You know, how often do we show Dickinson? What is his relevance to Provincetown and the art colony? Well, we ended up getting a third of those paintings, and they arrived, like, at midnight on a truck, and it was, like, one of those things where I was, like, there, just me and the truck and the paintings, and it was, like, better than Christmas morning. It was one of those things where these paintings are exquisite, and they were painted in Provincetown, Truro, and Wellfleet, and they needed to be here and not in Philadelphia. So that's just one example of how things happen, but a lot of it is word of mouth, and when PAAM started winning, we won 7 awards for merit, design, and sustainability, and we're also the first green art museum in the entire country, like, fully green using renewable energy. We're a Silver LEED certified building. The word started getting out in different circles about what is this museum in Provincetown, and then when the museum turned 100 in 2014, we did a big campaign to collect 100 significant, I'm using significant in quotes, pieces of artwork for the collection, and it started out with a single gift of about, I don't know, 14 paintings of Hoffman, Hopper, Motherwell, Knaths, Moffat, and that set the bar. That was it, and away we went. And what it ended up happening is a lot of people, you know, are leaving paintings to PAAM in their wills and their bequests and things like that, and people said, "Well, okay, I wanna accelerate my gift and give it to the 100th anniversary." And every time someone would ask me, "Well, how many where are you in your numbers?" I just said 85 because I wasn't gonna turn anything down. So I think we ended up getting 130 for the 100th anniversary because I'm greedy. I'm really greedy when it comes to the collection, and I wanted this to be it filled in a lot of gaps, and we were able to really, you know, showcase these phenomenal artworks, and that just keeps building and building and building. So when I started in '01, we had 900 works in the collection, and today I think we have 5,300.
Oh, wow, that's a lot.
Yep.
And when I look at the internet, it says 3,000, so you've gone
Yeah,
way
no,
beyond that.
that's supposed to be changed. But yeah, we've really worked hard to build the collection. We have a collections committee that is mostly artists and some art collectors that have really guided us in a way to make sure that photography has become really prominent in the collection, that the white line woodblock prints have become prominent, and that contemporary art is becoming more prominent. And so that's something that's an ongoing process for always. But that's what's going to tell the story 100 years from now. That collection is what is going to tell the story of who was here, what they were painting. Like Nappy's collection, you look at it, it tells you what the town looked like in 1920 or 1930. And then you look at the different processes, like the white line woodblock print, which is the Provincetown print that was perfected here in 1915. I mean, those are the kind of historic like benchmarks that this collection represents, and it excites me to no end to think about what else we can get into that collection.
And how do you deal with what's happening in the now in Provincetown? For example, I mean, Provincetown has evolved greatly as an art colony. Now we have a huge population of queer artists
Yes.
here. Uh, is How do you integrate all of that, all the now, into the collection?
Through the membership and
Okay.
through those members exhibitions. So the last member exhibition was resilience. That was we actually themed it. We do theme them once in a while, and it was so fascinating to see for the people who did participate in the theme what was going through their minds and how they used their art to actually convey maybe what's been happening in your head. Like during COVID, COVID was a perfect example of a period of time where there was no playbook, where you just had to kind of figure out what was best. And what we could do is open the museum and invite people to come in and just look at what's on the walls. And I have to tell you that I got more people to thank me to say, just walking in a safe space and looking at things that make me feel good helped me. And then we started closing the museum on Tuesdays to bring in groups like groups from the AIDS support group or from Helping Our Women or the Alzheimer's Association of Cape Cod to bring in groups that were not ready to be in a public space. So we would close the museum and bring in groups on their own time, and they could just come in and there would be no public in there. And we started developing more relationships with Outer Cape Health and with social service organizations to see how can we help you. And so we have a prescription program where you can actually get a prescription to come to PAAM. And, you know, people poo-poo the arts a lot and think they're a luxury charity and that their funding should get cut before everybody else's, which I can tell you because I've been doing this for 35 years, that art does save lives and art helps people cope or deal or get to another level that they need to be. And we can do that. And that's something I feel really good
Art therapy is a whole field.
about. 100%.
Yeah. Before I let you go,
Okay.
I want to know, in a dream world, if you could put together the exhibit of your dreams, what would it be? What would be on the walls of PAAM?
I think I've already done that.
Oh, you have?
I think I've done it lots of times, actually. Well, it's funny
Well, you're
because
in charge, so.
I am, and I do get to curate a lot, which is really, really fun. And I've curated, I think, over 250 exhibitions at PAAM. And I've been a co-curator, or at least, I mean, I'm involved in all of them, but I change my mind all the time but one of the great joys of having a collection is that you get to utilize it. And during COVID, I actually went to PAAM every single day during COVID. I was there a lot by myself, which I was fine with. And Jim Zimmerman would be there too, just the two of us. And I'd rifle through the collection and I'd see, oh my God, I forgot about this, or oh, this, I haven't seen this. And so I have a whole legal pad full of exhibitions that I've curated. There's actually one up on the walls right now. It's called Go Figure. It's a figure show that I curated, and it pulls from drawings and photography and paintings and prints and it's sculpture. And these, but I change my mind all the time. Like I'm all over, I'm like a whirling dervish when it comes to that. But like some of the shows that the Frankenthaler show that we did, that took 7 years to do that. The big shows that you have to, when you're borrowing, like the Dickinson show, that took 4 years or 5 years to do that. So the shows that come around, and so I'll tell you here. Okay, I can answer your question.
Okay.
So because we couldn't do that Blanche Lizelle show in 2002 because we couldn't take it, that always has been simmering in my mind. And so this summer, opening on August 29th of 2025, almost 22 years later, we are doing a major Blanche Lizelle exhibition.
Wonderful.
And I'm so thrilled about that because Lizelle studied with Hawthorne and Hoffman, and she was one of the practitioners of the white line woodblock print. So she kind of hits all the marks in terms of the art colony, and in such a supreme way. And we'll be able to feature Provincetown they're extraordinary. And so I've been waiting to do the show. This is kind of my full circle moment. So it's the Blanche Lizelle show.
Well, wonderful. I can't wait to go see it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This has been fascinating. I've learned so much. And
thank you.
As I've said in other episodes, I'm doing this show so I can learn. And I've learned a lot today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you around town.
You sure will. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Until next time.